Good evening. I almost said good morning. It's probably morning somewhere. But anyway, good evening. Welcome to another episode of SundownSurmisings with me, Daniel Gregory, and Jeff Deming over here, PJ and Dag. And we're going to start this month of July, which is kind of cool, right? We have a celebration in July 4th. This is July 3 you're watching right now. And about freedom, and we're going to do 4 stories that are kind of our favorites. And I think we're going to find out that so much of the Bible speaks.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter when you read it,
Yeah.
it speaks to the time.
It does,
right?
yeah.
Because a God who's infinite doesn't write a book that goes out of date.
Exactly.
And I'm hoping that as we're going through some of these stories and stuff, you can find something that will guide you or inspire you or cause you to think about whatever is going on in your life and around the world, in America, in your neighborhood. Right? Our first story is going to be Mark chapter 1.
Yes.
The one you like. So tell me about why you like it first off. I mean, why is this a cool story for you?
Let me go back to what you just said.
Okay.
Say that quote again. You said about an infinite God.
Oh, an infinite God can't write a book that goes out of date. So whatever he has in here, sometimes we look at it and think, oh, that was, thousands of years ago.
Right.
But I think the fun journey that we've been having is like, oh, wow, that actually is relevant to today, or I didn't know that today, and it's like, and he had that thousands of years ago.
Right.
It was written, and it still works.
Yeah. And that's what's so interesting about this, because I know that because we're supposed to read this map, but to hear you say it, it's like, that is so important. It's like, It's stuff for today.
Yeah. And tomorrow.
Yes.
And the next day.
Exactly.
So tell me about this story.
Well, this story is probably my favorite story of all the Bible. I have 2 of them. The other one has to do with Thomas and John.
Oh, yeah.
And that's my other one. But this is my favorite story.
Okay, wait. Which one in Thomas? It touched the side, or?
When he comes, I love the fact, if you look at the story of Thomas, and we should come over it sometime. I'd love to do that one again.
Yeah.
But he comes back specifically for Thomas.
Okay. All right.
And I just love that concept that everyone else was good except for this one person. And to me, it gives me that God would come back to me. And that's why this story kind of touches me too, because the idea that Jesus is so pinpointed on this one person.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And so I think that's why I kind of like these 2 stories, because it in situations, this one has to do with being ugly by world standards. And
being judged by other people as not worthy to be around.
Exactly. And also, of course, with doubting, they call doubting Thomas for that one statement he made. Kind of ostracizes him, but we all go through that. We all go through a struggle where we want to see evidence of God's presence.
Sure.
And that's what this story talks about.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Mark chapter 1, verses 40 to 42, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you want me to read it, or you want to read it?
Please do. Go ahead.
Okay. Mark chapter 1, 40 to 42. Again, if you have your electronic Bible, flick along with it, or brick and mortar type. I don't know what your paper and whatever.
Do you mind, Dad, if we take this one a little slower?
No, not a problem.
Let's do verse 40 first, and then we'll move together as we go along.
All right. So Mark 1, verse 40. There came a man who was a leper to Jesus, asking him, or King James says, beseeching him, kneeling down to him, and saying unto him, if you will, you can make me clean.
Okay, so to set the story up, as Doug has pointed out many times, I love the white spaces around the black letters. Now, as you've heard before, that I've been to, this last year, went to the Holy Land and was able to tour around. But in my imagination, I see these stories come alive. And you think about for a moment that this leprosy was the worst condemnation you could have.
Yeah. Death sentence.
Yes, it was death sentence. In fact, an author, Max Lucado, in one of his books called it Death by Inches. Because your nerves would begin to die, your fingers might fall off, your nose, Right. And so it was a process of loss. But I imagine for a moment this man, and we don't know the story, but maybe he had a family, maybe he had an occupation, maybe he had children.
At some point he had to have a mother or father.
Correct.
So there had been some family, and probably he couldn't see them.
Right. And so give us a little insight on Jewish law on what a leper meant.
Oh man, a leper meant, it wasn't just that you were unclean, and you had to, it didn't matter if you were king, you abdicated your throne. If you were priest, you left the office.
Right.
And there was a special place for you to live, but it wasn't just, that's not enough. You had to go wherever you were going to go. Let's say you need to go to the store to get food or whatever.
Right.
You had to announce to the world that you are not worthy to be around. Unclean, unclean.
And that's what strikes me. Now, the other issue with this is, as you look into this, they in their society of religion, mm-hmm. of different styles and expectations, mm-hmm. this was also known as the finger of God or the stroke of God.
Yeah. I
meaning,
have read that.
And going a little further, meaning that God is mad at you.
Yeah.
That somehow you did something, and I think we felt like a lot of times it was sin. When things happen in our lives, we think that something's wrong, that God is punishing us, and a lot of us have felt that. We say, why God?
Right.
But the society attributed that if you got leprosy, that God was somehow touched you or stroked you because of something.
Yeah, that's going to come back. I can see that one coming back already, which I hadn't thought of before. Yeah.
So then this story comes on, and what the struggle is that everyone matters. Everyone is valuable. Mm-hmm. Everyone is important. But we know it in the biblical times that if you weren't from Jerusalem or you weren't from Samaria, if you weren't part of this,
well, even Samaria, goodness gracious, Samaritans were considered like worse because they were half-breeds.
True.
Right?
Yep.
So they're a mixed breed,
yep.
mixed race. That was the whole question on John chapter 4 with the woman at the well. It's like, why are you talking to me? You're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan. You guys don't talk with. And so the Jews had a very caste society, like rigid. Yeah.
I want to tell you about a pizza story for a moment, okay? So just jumping out.
Sideline pizza. All right.
So one time when I was a youth pastor many, many years ago, mm-hmm. I had gotten pizza and I brought it back to my office. Mm-hmm. There was up in Vancouver, Washington, and I brought it back to my office and I told one person that I had pizza in my office. And you being a youth pastor many times, okay, I told one person, and it was a test, and I was needed as an object lesson for my sermon.
Oh man, I know where this is.
3 large pizzas in my office. I told one person.
And how long before?
9 minutes and 32 seconds. It was gone.
Gone.
It was gone.
Not just people showing up in 9 minutes, in 9 minutes 32 seconds, cleared out.
Yeah, it's cleared out.
Yep.
Now, the reason I tell that story is because of this situation. Yeah. Somewhere along the way, this man must have heard about this man named Jesus. Yeah. That there's pizza. Something's different. Right. Something's going on in this area. And I don't know where he was, where his colony was at, because they were having a leper colony. I don't know what he had to do. But 2 things that happened significantly. This man comes into that arena, as it were, wherever Jesus is walking. And he asks us, he does a couple things that get people upset. Yeah. He doesn't cry out, unclean.
And he moves in, and nobody's going to lay a hand on him.
Correct.
Because in their view, God has touched and cursed.
Correct.
But nobody's going to stop him by putting a hand, because they don't want to become unclean themselves.
Exactly.
So he just keeps coming in.
Right.
And he comes to Jesus.
Yep. He comes to Jesus, and I see this man. I see him crouched down in the dust and dirty, and in whatever cloths he has on has been soiled. It has been, it's just this picture of humanity which has lost humanity.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we forget that every one of us, under the creation of God, are humans, are valuable, are important, are significant. Right. And we tend to put them with labels. I'm not frustrated with people back then because leprosy was scary.
Yeah.
You and I are living in a global pandemic right now. Yeah. And there's a sense of fear. We've got to be careful. You and I wear facial masks whenever we're out and about.
Right.
Because there's a fear. And so I'm not critical of people around them because they didn't understand.
Right.
But what I love about the story is that Jesus came to give us understanding. Yeah. And that's what I love. So he kneels in the ground and said, if you're willing, you can make me clean.
And it wasn't, Jesus isn't saying that the disease was okay. But he's saying this is how you treat people.
Yes, powerful.
That's a big difference because he's going to change this guy's life. All right, so moving on to 41. So I'll pick up the end. If you can, or if you want to, I should say, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And Jesus, moved with compassion, put forth his hand.
Okay, I got to stop you there. Okay, I just because this gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
Because this just gives me, and Dad, this is a part probably that makes me feel comfortable at the start of my day and the end of the day going back to Jesus. Because you and I both know our own struggles and flaws better than anybody else does.
Yeah.
And then our families can even point them out closer to us sometimes. And sometimes we especially that we carry an extra tag of pastor. You know.
How dare you, or what, I mean, whatever.
Right.
As if they're somehow, yes.
And so I get the other day sometimes, and I think that, oh man, I'm just filthy. I'm just dirty. And what I love about this picture is that Jesus doesn't, I'm gonna tear up because this is so powerful. I'm so sorry.
No.
Jesus doesn't answer his question.
He does, but it's not with words.
It's not. That's a great point. It's not with words.
As soon as he had spoken, yeah.
Now read that part to us now.
Oh well, because I would say, and Jesus, moved with compassion, put forth his hand and touched him and said, "I will be clean." And I was going to point out that the word compassion is only used 12 times in the Bible, and all 12. Now, some of them occur in parables, like the prodigal father.
Okay.
But all 12 are always and only refer to God.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jesus was moved with compassion when he saw the crowd. Jesus was moved with compassion when he saw the leper. Jesus was moved with compassion when he saw the such and such. And the only other time that it's used to describe somebody moved with compassion is in a parable that refers to Jesus or God the Father.
What's the Greek word on that?
Oh man, this was I actually wrote it because I tried to practice. This is really hard to say, man. It's a spot. It's plagnomai. It's really hard because there's a gut and a ka and an in all together. Skomai. I can't hardly do it, but it means like from your gut. In fact, it's almost a literal, the root, the etymology of the word's root is where we get the word spleen. Okay. Because for the Hebrew particularly, and from the ancient world, they always felt their emotions were in their gut, right? Mm-hmm. I feel it in my gut. We even still use that phrase, right? A gut instinct, a gut feeling. I have a gut feeling about this. And that phrase comes from that idea.
Wow.
That was their way of saying the deepest seated emotion. And that's the word drawn from that this is being used to. Yeah. Jesus was moved with compassion. It was like a gut punch to him. And he couldn't walk by this humanity. Right. It was like, I got to do this. I have to do this.
Well, I can imagine that the political atmosphere, the church clerics, mm-hmm. the disciples, even people in society, they're like, what in the world are you doing? But Jesus, and I love that idea because he sees a human. Mm-hmm. He doesn't see the disease because unclean, mm-hmm. not supposed to touch him, mm-hmm. supposed to report him. Mm-hmm. Someone's got to come take care of this mess, and he moves in and he touches him.
Yes. Thinking of the curse as being touched by God, but watch what Jesus does. Jesus says, according to Mark, puts forth his hand, touches him, and then says, "I will, be thou clean." Verse 42 says, as soon as he had spoken, the leprosy departed. But that means it didn't depart when he touched him. Right. So he purposely touched him when he was dirty. Filthy.
Yes.
And I can't.
Why didn't I see that before? That's amazing.
I didn't think about it until you were saying it. And that's when you mentioned the touching earlier, my brain started playing through. That's why I kind of got a little off. I'm like, think about what Jesus is doing. You all have heard that this is God touching. Like God, as if God touching you is a curse, right? So it's again, it makes God look bad. It's if God touches you, it's got to be bad. And here's Jesus touching, and still dirty. There's no healing. He's like, I'm not. You can't get me dirty. You can't. It doesn't matter. No matter what you do, it's not going to get me dirty. Yeah. And then he says, "Be clean," and he's healed. Do you remember, I don't know if you know this series, the Towers of Gomorrah? There are 8 books.
I don't think so.
Okay. It was written by a theologian, but in the style of C.S. Lewis, his kids wanted him to write. And it's great read. I'm going to put up some pictures. I'm telling you that we read them to our kids when they were little, and awesome picture of God. In there, one of the things is one of the kids who's really gotten himself in a mess, mm-hmm. grabs Jesus' hand. He's embarrassed, because he's all filthy, whatever. And then he gets kind of misconscious, and he's just walking, and he's if Jesus, he's not saying anything to him, he's just walking along holding hands. And he pulls his hand out because he's like embarrassed and getting ready. He looks at his hand, he's like, his hand's clean. It's like, wow. So he kind of wipes more of stuff on his hand, right, from his shirt and puts it down. And whenever he touches Jesus, Jesus doesn't even seem to notice, and it just cleans it. You can't make Jesus dirty.
Wow.
You can't make God dirty. You can't get him. He will never be offended by. And that's what I'm seeing with this. I hadn't thought when you mentioned the touch, I'm like, oh, that's going to come around. Because here's the context. Touched by God's a curse. And Jesus says, no, touched by me is a blessing.
Right.
That's what it is.
Right,
and
yes.
you can't get me dirty.
Yeah.
Man.
Powerful.
Wow.
Well, my takeaway is this. And folks, understand that, and I love how Dag just cleared this up for us, that you can't make God dirty, but he can make us clean. He can make us whole. He can restore us.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
The word clean. That's real good. So the clean, right, is Greek katharizo, which we use in English cathartic.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
To cleanse your kind of thing. All right. So half of it is used about 30 times in the Bible. 17 of those are in the New Testament. One of the significant ones, and by the way, almost every single time the word is used in the Gospels, it refers to lepers being cleansed. Lepers being cleansed.
Okay.
Almost every single time. Even in the parables of the 10 people who were cleansed. Right?
Yes.
Everything. The only 2 times it's not is when Jesus talks to the Pharisees and says, you guys have tried to clean the outside and you left
the inside.
Right?
Okay.
And then John uses that in 1 John. It says, to him, right? So if we confess our sins, he is able and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all right. And it's the same word.
Wow.
So Jesus, he writes, acquainted with sin, and John is saying, leprosy, which is always used to how filthy and dirty. This is how to clean it.
Right.
John is saying, that's what he can do.
Yeah. That dirt. He
can take care of.
Yeah.
To cleanse our hearts, to cleanse who we are, to change who we are. Anyway.
Folks, God is amazing. And as we talk through these stories, they're you and I. Yeah. There are moments, there are times when you felt apart from your family, apart from your community, and you felt distance, especially from God. That Jesus, wherever he's at, he wants you to walk up to him and ask him, can you bless me? Can you restore me? Can you help me out? And so I hope you remember that this story is like, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus is always, when his children come, when his people come near, filled with compassion.
Yep. And his first words will be, I do want to be clean. Hey, thanks for joining us. Another episode of SundownSurmisings. Next week we're going to continue on. That was PJ's favorite story. Next week is going to be one of my favorite stories.
Nice.
It's like defining one. It's going to be from Acts 17. Tune in next week to see it. All right? See you later, guys.
Bye.